Seth, where are human beings going wrong? Where are we falling away from what it means to be human?
That's a big question. I think I've definitely spent a lot of time thinking that we are going wrong. And maybe I wouldn't necessarily put it in those terms anymore. Although that is the question that's currently being asked. But I suppose it's like I've been carrying this story around that we are going wrong and that I'm going wrong within that. And then any motivation to steer in a different direction seems to be rooted in shame rather than any kind of love. Mm-hmm. And that seems... I suddenly had to catch myself being, I don't know if that's the direction that feels true to me anymore. I would... If we have gone wrong, it's, for me, the only kind of language I feel like I can give to it now is the balance between head and heart seems to be off, maybe. And that I identify too much with this and not so much with this. And getting lost in signposts and language about the reality of the world as opposed from being in it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm kind of an advocate for anything, it's just being in a relationship with the reality of what's happening now, I suppose. That's the only place I can do anything with anyway. But that's very hard to access here. Mm-hmm. There's a glass wall and I can only do it here. And by the time I've realized I'm doing it in here, it's gone again. You know?
Yeah, it's almost, even in the language of head and heart, right, is inherent separation.
Exactly.
Or the illusion of separation, which is ultimately what we're talking about, right? If we feel separate from our own nature, separate from nature, mm-hmm. separate from each other, that's where these challenges, you know, again, I like how you reframed it. Perhaps we're not going wrong, but perhaps we're on a path that we need to just course correct and, mm-hmm. and look into slightly more. And so I think it's, I guess at the core of it, how do we reconnect away from that illusion of separation and drop a little bit deeper into our nature?
I think it's a thing. I think an easy way for me to think about it is in terms of connection to self or disconnected from self. If we're connected to self, we are in the process of renewal, healing, understanding. If we're disconnected from self, we're in the process of typically disease, right? Detachment. The body's trying to come back into balance or into equilibrium. When we're in disconnection from other people is when we have fear, jealousy, anger, greed, that separation, the not existing in a space of recognition that we are one. When we recognize we're one, we're collaborative. The things that we've achieved as humans together are incredible, beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. And connection to nature, we clearly see when we're disconnected from nature, the damage that we can do to our what is a shared environment, that principle of oneness. But when we come back in connection to nature, the wonder that we can express it, a tree or a flower or water, and the healing property of that by, again, being in balance with our environment, our ecosystem, brings everything back together. So I think a useful frame for me is about connection, and I think we can explore that topic. How do you think about connection?
I guess I try not to think about it too hard. I think like when it's there, I don't notice it almost. And like the connection between myself and others, or myself and other beings, when that feels present in my life, the kind of things I noticed are like, I can sit still for longer. You know, I can just sit and be like just doing nothing for 15 minutes and not needing to reach for any other things. The moments where like I realize maybe I'm more in a state of disconnection when I feel like I'm grabbing for something, I suppose.
I guess there's a gap to fill, right?
Yeah,
and therefore there's a reaching, and by definition, connection, by its very definition, we are with, so as part of something else. So you wouldn't recognize it in that sense, right? By its very definition.
The same as presence, right? And I think you were kind of alluding to this earlier. It's as soon as you start thinking about how can I be more present,
you're not
no
present.
longer present. How can I be more connected?
I'm no longer connected.
It's connection, presence are a default mode, the default setting for us. And it's just the layers, and perhaps this is where we've slightly lost our way, is the layers of life and modern existence are seemingly at odds with that, or certainly stacked against that natural connection, that natural presence that seems inherent. And maybe that's the friction that so many of us are feeling and experiencing now in how we actually show up in the world. And in your own life, Seth, like, what's the path been? You know, what's some of the backstory that's led you to how you live your life now?
Yeah, feeling pretty like just not knowing where I kind of stood as a kid and a teenager, maybe. Not knowing where my connections lay, or maybe not trusting the connections that were there. It's like the journey of connection into disconnection back to connection again.
Mm-hmm.
And like the inherent innate connection I felt as a, you know, to myself, for example, as a kid, as a baby, as a toddler, as a, you know, 7, 8, 9-year-old, and then something happens, you know, like around secondary school kind of level, or various things happen, which appear to have a knock-on effect that make a shutter go up to some degree. And then that shutter, that self-protection mechanism, it's a very powerful thing, and I'm very glad that it went up. But one of the key identifiers of this shutter that pops up for me is I start to really struggle to kind of love myself, like love on myself, and really look after myself in the way that I need to. And there's this boundary between sending and receiving love, either to others or to myself. And that's where I start to grab externally for things that I used to be able to supply to myself internally, the various vices or the whatever. Mm. And then it's that this shutter has come up to put me in this creates a state of disconnection, which I have a lot of gratitude for. And then it's a journey of being like, okay, that's not serving me again now. So now I have to bring that down. Or at least, actually what I'm learning is that it's like, it's not about like, if you've got shutter down here, full expansiveness, shutter up here, full contraction. I'm no longer interested in like, how do I stay at either end? How good is the muscle of dilating that open and closed, and knowing when is it appropriate to be open and expansive and when to do that. So I'm more interested in building the muscle of the system rather than which end of the polarity I sit at. So the journey back into connection is like this slow journey of knowing how do I protect. There's a reason why I became disconnected. There's a reason why I decided to shut off. And it's like learning when to kind of how to turn that on and off, basically, I suppose.
It's interesting. I think the journey, whether it's the hero's journey, whether it's the parable of the prodigal son, all of these stories that have stood the test of time seem to have this inherent need to go out into the world and learn the lesson, even if it's the hard lesson of that shuttering, right? Where it's like, we're young, impressionable, vulnerable in every sense of the word, and that shutter is almost entirely open, and we're very liable to experience pain. And then, we swing all the way to the other end of that pendulum to then learn the lesson of coming back, but not just constantly up and down. It's like, how do I, in a considered way, in a thoughtful way, how do I actually intentionally relearn to open myself to that? And I think that's something, particularly in the world of personal development, that people, I think, sometimes misconstrue or misunderstand, is that it has to be either or. We're very good at the polarization piece and swinging from end to end. And so I think that's where that intentionality around how do I open, it's a quote that I can't remember whose it is, but it's, developing a thick skin without allowing it to become a hard shell. And that balance of resilience and vulnerability, and how do we really intersect the two?
There's a difference between knowing something logically, and you said earlier about head and heart. We can know something in our head, we can know it logically, but to experience it physically is a completely different thing. It's a different level of understanding, of knowing when you experience something. And the only way to do that is to go out into the world and have experiences. Otherwise, we'd sit in our bedroom all day and you'd watch videos of oceans and forests and jungles, but it's not the same thing to having actually experienced it. But I think it's very difficult when we are experiencing the other end of the spectrum, where we form defenses and we shut off and we have difficult experiences, to not place a judgment on them as they happen as being good or bad. Typically when they're bad, it's because they threaten our vision of ourselves that we hold, or our very being, our survival perhaps. So I think it's challenging to navigate through life is difficult, but to recognize actually that all is necessary to form us into the person that we eventually will become. How's your perspective as you've grown, as you've changed, as you've come to recognize these principles changed?
Any aspect of my perspective, or just general perspective?
General perspective.
I think what you were speaking to about like that polarization, the younger version of myself had a disdain for middle ground, and feeling, wanting to gravitate towards extreme ends of any polarity, really, and feeling as if I was stood somewhere in the middle, I wasn't special, or I wasn't going to be noticed, or that wasn't going to be good enough, or something. But so I then follow the paths that take me to more extreme ends of polarity, whatever that looks like. For example, I just did this month of eating 100% wild food, just forest food for the month. It's been always a dream of mine to be able to do that, and I did it, and I was like, oh god, that's way too much for me. But there was always this romantic vision. I was like, I want to go and explore that end of that particular food spectrum where you got full processed at one end and then full wild hunter-gatherer at the other. I want to go and see what that feels like for a month. And it's actually too much for me. So now I'm like, my optimum is now somewhere back here. And the more I follow or explore the far edges of my boundaries, the more I naturally kind of come back to the middle, and I have less and less judgments of people who do sit maybe in the middle, older people who appear to be less extreme, who I previously judged, who are now somewhere in the middle, have probably followed their extreme paths to the edges. So I think, just valuing middle ground, I suppose, more.
We'll be right back to the episode after a very quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Whoop. The all-new Whoop is here. The only wearable that turns your health and fitness data into personalized guidance, now 7% smaller, with over 14 days of battery life. I've been using Whoop to stay on top of my recovery, training, and stress during busy periods, and the insights have genuinely changed the way I look after my body, how I train, and my overall health and well-being. Whoop includes a heart screener with on-demand ECG readings so you can check in on your heart anytime and share the results with your healthcare provider. It also includes HealthSpan, a new feature that demystifies the aging process and shows how your daily habits impact your pace of aging, as well as hormonal insights for personalized guidance throughout your cycle or pregnancy for women. It's the only wearable that gives you a truly comprehensive view of your body, designed to help you improve your performance, longevity, and overall health. You can join Whoop now at join.whoop.com/human nature. That's join.whoop.com/human nature.
Think of that as, for me, about running.
Yeah.
And needing to go and do like ultra distance, ultra marathons, multi-day events.
Yeah.
And coming back to actually, I quite just enjoy going out for a 30-minute run on a Sunday. And slowly now.
Totally. Yeah.
But I have that appreciation because I've pushed it at the other end of the limit.
Yeah. And do you feel that it allows you just to enjoy like the normal running a lot more then? Yeah,
because the normal running before it's also contextual, because going out for a 30-minute run before felt quite difficult.
Yeah.
Right. But when I've ran 10 hours a day for 7 days in a row, going out for a 30-minute run feels like making myself a coffee.
Yeah.
So it's almost, it gives context to everyday experience. And the same with you with the month of eating wild food. I'm sure that now, having going foraging once a week, twice a week, eating 20% forage food maybe feels like a bit of a breeze. Whereas for the average person, having not had the context of only eating forage food, probably is a lot more challenging. So I think extremes of any behavior can be helpful to give context, but also for us, as you said, to push our limits and see where we come back to. It's like life being an exploration. Right? Well, I'll try that. I think especially now with the way that we show up in society, but on social media, we define ourselves by these kind of reductionist labels, which is, I am a accountant, I live in this neighborhood, I'm part of this community, and I'm into CrossFit. And I can't explore anything outside of those identities because that's who I am and that's who I've said I am, and I need to uphold this image. Whereas I think actually the the joy that I get to explore. This week, and my friends, I thought you were doing that last week, and now you're trying this. I'm like, I want to go and play golf for a few months to see how it feels.
Yeah.
I like to go snowboarding and see how that feels.
Yeah.
And just this
hat.
freedom to test different things, you know.
Yeah. It's almost this nature of, you know, to be easily defined makes your life easy short term, but challenging long term.
Yeah, really.
Both by yourself and others, right? It's like if you're in a box, you know, I know who Jamie. I went through this as well. Certainly more so at the beginning of my career. Of what I do now is Jamie is the breathwork guy. I was like, yeah, I am. That's easy to define, and I like the label, so I'm going to hold on to it and allow everybody else to hold on to it. And the more that continued, the more I felt trapped and suffocated and claustrophobic, and felt that need to expand and open into, actually, what if I didn't want to do that at all? And I haven't quite gone to the extreme, but certainly like expanding my horizons to go, there's, for me more than anybody else, there's more to me. I know that than just this. And so how can I change and morph and evolve within that? And I think the same to be said for people who change their opinions. You know, we often think that a sign of intelligence is someone who knows things and it's clearly defined, but actually, you know, the highest sign of intelligence is someone who can change their mind in the face of new information or new, you know, the best science is the science that changes is when there's new evidence. And so I guess how do you find that, you know, and we're all in our own way in the realm of social media, where actually to be clearly defined and easily defined serves you in certain ways because people know what to expect, the kind of persona, you know, that shows up online. What's your experience of that been like in terms of as you've grown a public profile as well on social media and how you relate to that part of your life?
Yeah, I'm really glad this is coming up because this feels like really alive for me at the moment, for sure. Because it's been quite a short period of time that my like identity has been kind of calcified around this like online presence. It's only two years this May, and for those 2 years I felt very like, yeah, okay, I'm that identity. And then more recently I feel just that I'm gravitating, or that is an aspect of who I am rather than the complete thing. And I do feel an overwhelming pressure to be easily identifiable, or at least my protective mechanism really wants that from a place of safety. And when I'm feeling ungrounded, I'm feeling a bit like, you know, when I'm feeling disconnected, actually, you know, when I don't feel like I'm in a state of love for myself, love for other people, seeing similarities, feeling in that connection, one of the things I look to grab hold of is like a really solid, consistent identity where every single person knows what they're going to expect from me. And how can I be this like unwavering me in every situation that I might come across? And that pressure, I don't really know where that pressure comes from. I don't know if it's even worth even asking that question. But I've never had anyone ever come up to me and be like, oh, you were that thing last week, or you like, that's something that I'm completely making up for some reason. But I do feel a pressure to be really consistent. Like inconsistency seems to be one of the things that I'm, for some reason, really trying to avoid. You know? And that kind of, it's like it's what I would call like the kind of the Joker card or the Joker energy, the one where it's just like everything appears to be normal, and then suddenly I just get up and I flip this chair for no reason, you know. And that's within the remit of the behavior that I could do right now. And occasionally letting myself just do things that seem like so far out of the particular role that I've decided to play for the last few years, just because it's like really, for me, I think it's really good to flex the Joker muscle, just to do the weird thing, you know.
For sure. I think it's almost the counterbalance to those moments where you do feel like you've been living in that consistency and that fixed identity. I certainly feel it. I'll get random urge to do something that would be so out of character, but it's just human. If we're acknowledging wholeness as fact, right?
That's got a really good one.
Then
when you hand me a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly.
I turn around and Jamie's smoking a cigarette. I'm like, and then we're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I haven't smoked a cigarette in 15 years. Why not?
Totally.
Exactly. And I think those little things, I'm like, I would have shamed myself so hard for that 2 years ago. I would have been like, that's so off-brand. That's so inconsistent. And I heard someone else put it as, I got tired of having to live up to in private the expectations that I had of myself in public. And it's like
Yeah,
we've got
that's
this
beautiful.
flipped,
Yeah.
warped thing now with social media and public personas where we are presenting as something that can still be real and authentic, absolutely, but it's not the full picture. It will never be the full picture, just as much as sitting on a podcast, people get to meet us, but they don't get the full picture
Yeah.
because there's only so
I
much
think
of yourself you can show.
there's a thing around hanging your hat on an identity, and I think there's an expectation that you should maintain that identity forever. But I can only maintain the identity in the moment that I'm expressing the identity. Because ultimately, I've got no idea what I'll be interested in a week's time, a month's time, a year's time, whatever else. And where we see consistency in opinions almost everywhere, there's very few examples of people that change their mind, and or even less so, do so in public, and are able to hold their hands up, because it threatens the identity that we have, and it threatens that ego identity that wants to protect yourself as an individual, right? I think it's a really challenging, really challenging thing to do, and it comes back to you said the word safety. That's what it comes back to, and I think we're in this constant, almost like negotiation with the hardware that seeks to protect our being and our ability to function in a world where actually we're reasonably safe compared to how any point in certainly recent history. And it's a really difficult reconciliation. And again, we come back to the first point. If you do go there, you end up spending even more time in the head trying to reconcile it rather than just being there in the first place.
Yeah, it's a messy one. And that's, I guess, it brings me back to almost the phrasing of that first question. It's like we can never, I suppose, in a way, in terms of our evolution and development, do things wrong, but we're following this path that is being set out for us in various ways, and witnessing the consequences, witnessing the outcomes, and I think that's really fascinating when we think.
Where do you think we're going wrong? If we were to be going wrong, or if we were to be, I guess, wrong, let's rephrase it. If we were to be moving away from what makes us inherently human, where do you think we're doing that?
So in my work, I mapped out what I feel are, like, in my opinion, from personal experience and people that I work with, 3 primary challenges of modern existence. The first being disconnection and disembodiment. So what we were talking about, head versus heart, just being very much stuck up in here and disconnected from the visceral physicality of our experience. Second being chronic dysregulation, dysregulating environments, high pace, ultra convenience, lack of challenge, lack of resilience. And then the third being disconnection from meaning. We have now got these pseudo meaning structures. It's porn instead of sex. It's social media instead of real connection. It's, we've got all of these fake meat type substitutes for anything that used to give us meaning. Community, social media was supposed to support us in connecting, but it's just become another commodity. And so we're lacking these fundamental nutrients of meaning and modern life. And it's really, it's like we've got this, like, I heard John Vervaeke call it spiritual junk food. It's like we have something that looks like meat, it looks like meaning, but it's not quite. And so I think that, for me, if we look at where the odds are stacked against us as far as things that are now lacking, those are the 3 like core factors for me around, not necessarily even that I'd say it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. The way the world is set up, the environments we live in, tech, systemically, all of these aspects that are moving us towards these things. And our biology, there's a mismatch with our biology, is where I see things.
It's almost a divergence, because whilst I totally agree, I think as we're seeing this rise of AI and the digital sphere, we're also seeing in parallel the rise of a return to a more natural, slower way of living in food, in practices, in community settings, and people leaving cities. This is, I think, something that's being popularized over the last 5-6 years, and it's something that we're all benefiting from because we're all championing a similar route. And I think you could say it's a consequence of that rise of AI and the digital world that we're seeing more of an interest in the things that we're all speaking about.
My gut there, as you were talking, was to say yes, but because it's all happening. My brain went to the Truman Show. You guys see the Truman Show?
Yeah.
We are inside this bubble of the Truman Show, which are the rules of the game by which we're all playing. And it's like what I see in the wellness world now, which is people trying. The intentions start good, and then we reach the glass ceiling of, or the literal ceiling of the Truman Show, where actually you are limited fundamentally by the system in which we're playing that game in, and it actually just cuts you out of the knees as you start to get anywhere. It's like this rebellion towards slow living, sure, but we're all still so immediately, ultimately connected and connectable and contactable that it makes it incredibly hard to have an authentic, genuine experience of that slower pace of life. And that could just be because I still live in the city and I haven't taken the steps to escape yet. And I feel like we're all at slightly different stages of that process. But yeah, I wonder the reality of, if the world at large is doing one thing, just how challenging it can be to choose the other and be intentional in choosing the other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really feel that, like the glass ceiling thing, and like there is only so far that you can take it, particularly within. There's all sorts of glass ceilings, and there's different layers to it. There's like a glass ceiling that you could just call the United Kingdom, and like to operate here, there are certain things that I need. I could maybe find my way to a different place, and then I'd need the glass ceiling would change again. But as long as I've committed to the land here and the culture here, there's to some degree I'm like tied to the tools and the frameworks that help me like navigate being here. And I kind of, for a long time, I was like banging my head against a brick wall trying to get rid of my iPhone, and like I did use a brick phone for like 3 or 4 months, a few years, but just before I came onto social media. And I'm so glad I did that because I'd never experienced adulthood without a smartphone, without social media, and it was probably the best thing I ever did. And at the time, I was definitely like, this is going to be a long-term solution for me. As soon as I kind of started to assimilate back more into like the normal flow of culture, I like just needed it. And then spent the last year or so being like, how do I return to that place? And only recently I'm making peace with the fact that I'm just not going to. But all of that, like, I'll feel more connected when I, move out of the city or get rid of my smartphone or find a way to delete my social media, or when I start growing my own food, or I've finally foraged enough. All of that is still, for me, an external attempt to find the clarity within me,
Yeah.
And, it's taken me till recently to realize that, I kept trying all these various avenues, and they appeared to be getting more and more and more and more and more wholesome, and it seemed to point me more and more at the thing I was looking for. And then it was just like, eventually I just had to put those down and be like, the thing that you're trying to look for by getting rid of your iPhone, you can give yourself right now if you want, but for some reason there's a big piece around permission,
Yeah.
I had a funny one yesterday. I had this like little stick of incense. I was about to jump in the shower. I was feeling pretty dysregulated. I'd just been to the shops, doing stuff on my phone. Had this little stick of incense, and I ran around the house like 5-6 times trying to find a lighter, and I just couldn't find one. And I was just like, it hit me. I was just like, you can go. The incense was about to give me permission to sit down and do nothing for 10 minutes before I got in the shower. And I was like, what? Why do you need that to do it? You don't, like, you can give it to yourself right now. And if the lighter presented itself, fine, add the incense. It's not about not adding the incense either, but just like, you don't need that to be the portal or the gateway to allow yourself to sit down and do nothing for 10 minutes.
I agree with you entirely in the sense that everything we need is here, and whether you move somewhere else in the UK or a different country, the old cliche, like wherever you go, there you are. And the same challenges will present themselves just in a different form. But I do still feel there is this, I feel that the way the world is heading and is now makes that journey, that very short but very long journey, it's making it more challenging. And so I think that's why we do find people reaching for the rituals, for the incense, for the ceremony, because we need help. We need some hand holding to get there, because we are increasingly at odds with the environment in supporting us in getting there.
I really, really feel that.
Yeah.
It's a way to give me, I think, ritual is a way to give meaning to every day. And you know, my direct experience recently of a change of environment has been profound, because going from living in Dubai, living in London, and being in a city, and waking up every day, and yes, I can give myself the peace, but it's a damn sight harder when I'm in zone 1 and I can hear traffic outside from 6 in the morning. To I now live in West Sussex, and I live in the middle of a forest, and there's a river at the bottom of the garden, and I'm surrounded by fields, and the ability to drop into that liminal space surrounded by nature is so easy. It's so there. Yes, I need to practice, because obviously I'm going to interact with those other environments, but the day-to-day experience is enhanced by being in that space. I think it's just about being intentional, first and foremost, and then bringing ritual in to give meaning, because I could quite easily exist in that space. And if I did exist in where I am now 10 years ago, I wouldn't have seen the trees. I wouldn't have seen the river.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have seen
because it can be that way
animals.
around too, can't it?
For sure.
You can be in it, in those environments, and still not be able to,
Yeah, and if you're in a level of stress, anxiety, dysregulation, the silence can be awful. So loud. You know, to be with your own thoughts is challenging for a large majority of people, and that's actually why the noise and the pace becomes addictive.
What do you think about what you put out, the information, the perspectives that you share resonates with people? What about it resonates with people? Why do you think in this time it's resonating so much with people?
I mean, anything would be speculation, but maybe it's because of, I think it's all sorts of things to all sorts of people, but maybe just to like another path, like a counter to what's being presented. And I think particularly to a Western British audience, or maybe specifically a British audience, like I have always been in love with the various forms of the natural world, you know, and watching that on David Attenborough shows, and like, you know, bird watching as a kid, all of these things have just been what I've been absolutely fascinated by, and the shape that it takes for some reason, and I like looking at that. But the kind of either like directly or indirectly, I was always told that the UK wasn't that, basically. Like here it's like boring and everything's small and nothing really exists here. If you want to go and see the real stuff, well, then you best go to the Amazon, or, you know, sub-Saharan Africa or something, you know, and go to like the Kalahari Desert or something. And that's where the real action happened, you know. And that, I feel very grateful that I was raised by a father who didn't have that perspective about British wildlife. And he showed me from a very young age that it was a ridiculous comparison, like to choose between a hierarchy of beings based on aesthetics, as opposed to fall in love with the deeper connection as to why these things have, not why necessarily, but they've originated from the same source. That was a far more beautiful thing to be preoccupied by, maybe, or at least a far more whole place to be fascinated in these things by, and to be able to like look at, you know, the like things in your garden in the UK with the same beauty that you would look at an elephant or a tiger. It's not that they aren't beautiful, but it's just that they've, you know, they're different hairs on the same head, and that's just like really beautiful in that way. And I think more on top of that is mainly because we're so disconnected from our indigenous ancestry in Western Europe and in the UK, we forget that those things ever existed here. And then it just wasn't that long ago that we did have, you know, the temperate rainforests like a, you know, 1,000-year trust in Kabila, or, you know, these great kind of plains with herds of auroch and with like bear and like wild boar and all sorts of beings that like we probably wouldn't even know existed here. You know, I'm learning now that the west coast of Britain around the temperate rainforests would have had tree frogs, like a tree frog species. I mean, we generally associate tree frogs with tropical climates, but in temperate rainforest, there would have been a frog that filled a similar niche. And the idea that the UK would have had tree frogs, it's like kind of, it keeps like shaking up the image of what I think Britain looks like or would have looked like. And it just wasn't that long ago. And I think I'm presenting a story, which is ultimately what it is. I wasn't there. I can't know what's going on. But I'm presenting a story to suggest that any of the wildness and beauty of the natural world that you see out there exists here on the ground here and here as well. you're kind of, you can connect to that land, that wild land, and that indigenous ancestry wherever you are, because the thing that's separated us from that is that long in comparison to that long, basically, and reminding everyone that like that's the main bit, and that the genetic memory remembers that bit a lot faster than it identifies with that bit, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's brought something really interesting up in my mind, which comes back to a lot of the conversation we've already had around things like meaning and purpose, and actually how we feel in our environment, which is, we can talk at a very basic level about the importance of connecting to nature, blanket. We go connect to nature, and somehow you end up feeling more connected to yourself. You know, we've all experienced that to various extents, and most people have in some way, shape, or form. But then you go a layer deeper, and actually you go somewhere like, you know, the rainforest at Kabila, or into these relatively maintained ancient aspects of our own land, and you start to feel something deeper than just, oh, isn't it nice to have my feet on the ground and to be around some trees. And I think particularly, as you alluded to as well, in Western modern society, we've lost that connection to indigenous roots. And you see, if you look to Central America, or you look to Africa, or anywhere where there's still significant connection to the land and indigenous wisdom traditions, that there is a sense of all of the things we mentioned: community, meaning, health, you know, these core aspects of real human living and wholeness. You see that there as a byproduct or an inherent part of connection to the indigenous and connection to what is ancient. And so I think as we navigate this, there is that real sense of needing, because I certainly feel, and we've spoken about this before in the context of psychedelics, and I suppose the indigenous lineage of psychedelics in the UK, because we often, we trek to the Amazon to do ayahuasca, we go all over the place, and actually we go, what's right here? And we're from here, so why aren't we exploring what's right here? And I think that's something that I don't feel we have anywhere near as much of a connection to in the UK in particular, given that we're here, as would be not just interesting, but actually beneficial and healing to really honor those roots and honor that lineage, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I learned the other day, I don't know much about South American plant medicine or anything like that, but I learned that ayahuasca is a combination of two plants.
Yeah.
Those two plants like aren't psychoactive in their own way or something, or like it takes both, like kind of takes two to tango in that sense, and you create this thing. And I'm like, in the UK, maybe those two plants exist now, that we don't have those old kind of like medicine people who know how to combine these things, or maybe the environments in which those plants did exist now no longer exist. Yeah. Maybe we would have had a whole host of other plant medicines that, due to our like shifting baseline syndrome and not realizing what wild environments actually look like, we're under the impression that we don't have them at all.
Or maybe we just burnt all the witches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly that.
The most interesting fun fact about ayahuasca is that those two plants don't grow near each other.
Right.
Either.
Okay.
So how did they know to combine them?
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating.
It reminded me when you were speaking of this childlike wonder we have. I remember being very young and, seeing like a ladybird or bugs or like worms or whatever, just the fascination that you would have to see these different animals and shapes and textures. And that's part of what I feel when I see the things you speak about is that remembering of what it felt like to be in a sense of wonderment. And our baseline for what inspires our wonder now is so high that we miss the beauty and the everyday things. And that's where I think ritual can play such an important role to come back to, even in the context of eating a meal. We just accept that, of course, there's an abundance of food in the cupboard, and we've got the utensils, and we've got the fire to cook it, and we're nourished and we're never hungry. Just take it. Is taken for granted in the same way that the environment is just taken for granted. And I think the way that we break out of that is through spending time in such spaces, creating rituals and ways to give meaning to spaces. But it comes back to this recognition and awareness of what is, without the layer of, oh yeah, but of course. I wrote in journal recently that I had to stop saying nothing special. Like when someone says, oh, what are you up to? It's like, oh, nothing special. Everything is special. Everything is special. I'm going to say, oh, nothing special, nothing. What happened for dinner? Nothing special. Everything special. Coming back, blowing that baseline of what inspires your wonder, I think is such a powerful way to come back into that sense of connection and gratitude from where everything else can go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I really, really feel that. I've definitely been on a bit of that, like, even in, like, currently been, like, embodying that a lot more, I think, and, like, having much clearer access to the little boy behind the shutter who could do that without trying. And so much of what I've been sharing on social media, I feel like, this is maybe not what other people pick up on, but is me trying to communicate and justify why those behaviors are okay. You know, one of my core memories that my 10-year-old has is doing a presentation in year 5 or year 6 or something about bar-tailed godwits, which are a type of wading bird, to the class, and just being completely shut down by it, you know? And from that, like, I'm an avid bird watcher. As a kid, I have a little bird book with me everywhere I went, binoculars. I'd write down a bird list every single day, just like fascinated by it. And then I quickly learned that wasn't something I was going to share. And then it became a private thing. And then exactly what you spoke about before, then that private thing I felt like I couldn't even do myself.
Yep.
And then so now what my social media represents to me, it was like the Shutter Seth and little Seth were kind of like in relationship with each other, where Shutter Seth was going to kind of package this up in such a way that he was going to prove to everyone why that was an okay thing to like or to love. And now I feel like I can just love it again without having to tell anyone why I love it. I don't need to justify that I like looking at insects or birds. That's just a fun thing to do. Yeah. But I also have this other kind of dialogue for when someone is curious about why that might be worth their time, or, you know, I can use the brain and words as to why I might communicate that as well.
Why is it?
Why you do that? Because I think it reflects something so, like, beautiful back to ourselves. You know, I think it, like, when we say that, you know, you find it much easier to, like, drop into that state of presence in these more natural environments. I think I used to definitely think that it was the outside catalyst that's doing something to me internally. I now see it as like a scaffolding kind of. It's like it's always a mirror. You can use that language. It's almost a training ground to be able to do it on the tube or something. Or and when I see something that is beautiful, in like saw a beautiful hummingbird hawk moth a couple of days ago. I don't know if you've seen them. They look like hummingbirds. They're about this big, but they're a moth, and they've got like this long, and like they look really exotic, and they look like they shouldn't be in the UK based on our understanding of the UK. And to look at that and just feel like give myself the permission to just love it. That's it. There's not really any other thing than that. And in that process, be more in a state of love. You know, it's not that insect is like actually giving something to me externally. It's like waking something up in me so that I can feel in a state of love, maybe. You know, and I think natural things, because humans have evolved in a much more natural environment, I think that helps them. That mirror is easier than in maybe urban settings.
Yeah.
I think there's something that I'm called to, which is, I listened to an excerpt of Zach Bush speaking the other day about what happens to the environment when humans witness beauty, and we can connect this back to the things like the Japanese water experiment, where the way that we interact with molecules in water influences the shape and the geometry of the water, and because we're made of water, plantings are made of water, speaking to the fact that the way that we express appreciation of beauty towards an animal or a plant can actually affect the molecular structure of that being. And how actually one of the greatest gifts that humans have is the way that we can imprint upon the world, back to it, our appreciation of the beauty of the world, and how that elevates our experience and the thing that we witness. And I thought it was just this beautiful way of thinking about what we're potentially part of what we're here to do, which is to witness beauty and to express that feeling of witnessing beauty, because that in itself brings us back into that connection, that awareness, that state of being, which is love.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Stride, and I'm going to hand over to Andrew, the founder of Stride, to tell you a little bit more about it.
Millions of us track our steps every day. We track our sleep stages, we track our heart rate and our heart rate variability. But what's crazy is that we don't actually track what's going on inside, and I want to change that. I believe that tracking your internal biomarkers and biology should be as common and as habitual as tracking your wearable data. Whether you're already tracking your fitness, your sleep, your recovery, whether you're looking for better energy and resilience and focus in your day-to-day life, be that at work or at home, or if you're just looking to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible, Stride One gives you complete clarity for your health. Your membership includes expert coaching, personalized recommendations, access to tailored supplements just for you, and ongoing regular retesting. You'll regularly track your DNA, your gut microbiome, advanced blood biomarkers, and biological age. You'll be assigned your own registered dietitian for expert coaching and ongoing support. And we wrap all of this into a simple, easy to use digital platform. We'll help you turn your health data into action. This is more than a membership. It's a movement towards smarter choices, longer life, and complete clarity for your health.
You can get 10% off all your orders with Stride at getstride.com/human. Now let's get back to the show.
It's that illusion of hierarchy that we do a very good job of putting ourselves on a pedestal as intelligent beings, uniquely intelligent beings, and that removes us from that connection to the inherent symbiosis of all of it. You know, if we think we are better than, or more than, or greater than, or more intelligent than, then why would I send positive energy to a plant, to an animal? Because they don't get it. But they get it in a way that actually we've probably lost touch with. It was interesting. One thing that I was thinking was even the question of, so why should somebody pay attention to these beings, these entities? Yeah. That's, again, it's operating at the level of the head, because actually the question is, there's no question.
Yeah.
There doesn't need
it's a stalemate.
to be a reason.
It's like a double bind.
Yeah, exactly. It's a stalemate, and it's the feeling and the reminder that the feeling gives you beyond the thought, because actually it speaks to operating back at the level of the head to go, this needs to be a productive activity, otherwise it's not worth my time. And that is full circle back to the challenge that we face in general, where it's everything has to be a worthwhile use of time,
or optimized. What are you optimizing for?
How's staring at that moth gonna impact your sleep quality? And you're like, exactly. Actually, if you let it probably would. In some way, shape, or form. But that's not the why.
And you don't need to know why.
And you don't need to know why. And you perhaps will never know why. And that's the mystery and the beauty of
it's permission.
All of it.
Permission
is what the word.
Permission to be a human being. Not or just to be, right, and not be constantly. And again, I think all the way back to the first question, where are we going wrong? If we want to use that question, it's the feeling like, in order to exist in the world and in order to be part of this community, we have to offer something. We have to be pursuing something, doing something, rather than being. And you mentioned the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is very true, because we can't just be, because we have to buy food. Maybe not, you forage for a month. We have to have a roof over our head. We have these things we have to pay for, etc. And so it's almost like this dance, right? It's trying to come into this way of being while also functioning within the glass ceiling, which is the challenge. And not to say any of us have that answer, but I think it's such an interesting topic to explore.
Totally. And again, it's like that. Those two things that you've brought up there is like another polarity spectrum. And it's the same way we were speaking about like head and heart. And it's like, well, which one is it? Which one should I be? And it's like this, my mind or my conditioning, whatever I want to call it, has decided that it sees a polarity spectrum, and the efficiency part of myself or the optimization part of myself goes, oh, well, one side's got to beat the other, obviously. And why do I default to that all the time? That one side, like, I have a much more consistent meditation practice these days, but the reason I wasn't meditating before was because, or dropping into a state where I allowed myself to be, well, I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I may as well go to a monastery, or I may as well go by myself to the woods for a year and do it.
Got to do it properly.
I'm going to do it. I've got to follow the whole thing. And again, it's this thing of being like having to be extreme about everything, because this idea that if I'm going to do a little bit, I should do the whole thing. And this idea that we have that, like, oh, you must always do your best. And it's a nice thing to say, and I kind of get why people say it, and it's something that really permeates our culture. But I don't really know if I feel that that's the thing that I want to say to myself anymore. that like I must be pushing the boundary of my ability to perform, knowing that like, well, actually, I'm pretty good when I'm at 50% capacity. Like, I show up to a podcast like this and just be like, well, even if you just showed up at your 50% capacity, well, maybe that's absolutely great, you know?
And even to put it on a linear scale, right? It's like, I'm going to show up as I am now.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the same again tomorrow.
Yeah,
and I'll do the same again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I won't compare.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know why my jiu-jitsu coach just popped into my head. When he's demonstrating a submission, I go, what's the best submission from this position? And you'll get some people going, oh, it's the arm bar. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the triangle. It's the Kimura. He goes, no, it's the one that works. And I think I bring that back into this like permission. It's not right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not this is better than that. It's not do this, do that. It's actually what can you give yourself permission? Mm-hmm. How do you want to show up? And how can you give yourself permission to show up exactly as you are in a way that works for you, in the understanding that we're all different and need different things, which I think is against everything that the ego and the finite mind and this illusion of separation wants us to believe. And that's where, when we get into the realms of playing the games of social media and business and the system, it does permeate the culture. It does land, because there is a part of us that is so desperate for control and desperate for certainty. And so if you know that, people can use that intentionally, you know, whether it's shadowy or well-intentioned, people can use that intentionally. And I think that's, you know, the worm at the core of the condition that we find ourselves in. So.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier about like, but yeah, that thing around permission's been a massive one. Oh yeah, it's like you're saying the kind of the default position for people seems to be like to be present and to be connected. It's what's coming up in front of that's stopping that, rather than something that they're not doing or something. That's why this, like the permission to be able to see beautiful things and love stuff is exactly that. It's like when I let that mask drop down, or I let that, like whatever that feeling is, that feeling in my body that goes, nope, you're not allowed to do that for some reason, and I can let go of that, and then I'm not in an activity of loving that particular moth, you know, in the same way that I'd go and play football. You know, it's not that. It's something that comes with really not doing anything, and it's like that represents the background behind the figure almost. You know, that's my off state is to do that, rather than anything that I have to go and try and do. And it's this idea that like, oh, well, I'm looking at this moth now, and then like, I love you.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And it's like, that's not what it is either. There doesn't really have to be any language around it either.
Same as meditation. I think this is what always comes up for me very, very often when I speak to people about meditation. It's like, yeah, I just really tried to meditate and I can't. So that's the very thing that's stopping it.
In ceremony, I remember I got told, funnily enough, in the jungle in Costa Rica, doing plant medicine, and the shaman goes, there's a distinct difference between trying to surrender and trying things to support the process of surrender. It's engage in the activity of meditation, of being in nature, that creates the thing that you're, I don't love to use the word seeking, but perhaps the state that your intention is behind. And it's the same with all of what we're talking about. It's like, the moment you try to surrender, just as we were saying before, the moment you try to be present, you've lost.
Try to go to sleep. You know, the best way to not go to sleep is to try.
It's paradoxical, isn't it? It's like seeking anything pushes it further away, because the energy that you're in when you're seeking it is suggesting that you don't already have it. Right.
I'm in a state of the question.
The energy of the question
attracts the question.
It's so funny when you start riffing on this stuff, because it's stuff we all think about but don't really talk about. And then you talk about it, and
I then catch myself
figuring it out.
And maybe it's awful for a podcast as well, because I then catch myself going, the reason it feels at points like it goes round in circles, in good ways and bad ways, is that language in of itself doesn't do it justice. It's limiting when you get into the realms of what we're trying to put language to here.
It'd be just as reasonable just to sit here for an hour and a half and say nothing to each other.
Exactly.
You know, if you like, you know, when like Zen masters say that with like the best thing in this lecture that I could do is just do nothing. But that's also a bit like, we want to show up for the dance of the whole thing, you know. So let's talk about it, knowing that talking about it is never going to do it justice. If we really want to do it justice, we'll sit here and do nothing. But that's actually not quite fun sometimes.
Yeah, it's still a level of active engagement in the process. Otherwise, it all becomes farcical.
Exactly.
So should we just sit here for a bit?
I would like to ask you, as someone who's perhaps listening to this, or for my benefit, if somebody's thinking, God, yeah, I've been thinking this kind of stuff, but I don't really know where to start with it all. Especially around reconnecting with the environment that we have here in the UK, and themes within that, like foraging, like seeing animals. How could someone like that, that's spending a lot of time in an urban environment, start to explore those things? Like, what would you say? Okay, like 101. Where do you go? What do you do? How do you start? Because I think it's such a tool for people who, you know what, the last 6 weeks I've been for brunch every Saturday, I've got drunk. Sunday I've laid in bed all day hungover. During the week I've been for a few dinners, but I'm kind of getting a bit bored of all that. I'd like to go out on a Sunday and do something completely different. Where would you go? What would you do?
I think there's a whole host of things that I could do, again, to like give myself permission to drop into a state of like wonder and seeing beauty. And one way to do that, you know, there's various scales of that. You know, when I come to London, the kind of things I like to do would be like, I didn't actually have time this time, but I really wanted to go to the Natural History Museum. And I was on a job a couple of weeks ago in Italy, and the city that we were staying in happened to be the home of like this crazy archaeological find of like a man from the Copper Age, and he was like perfectly preserved in this glacier. And I'd done a load of research on him before. He's called Otzi the Iceman. And I didn't know that the shoot location for this particular job happened to be the city where this museum was. And he's fascinating because he was carrying all these medicinal mushrooms and this like hard evidence to show that like people 5,000 years ago were, you know, using these things as medicine. So in the foraging community is really, so it's things like that. It's like, it doesn't just have to be like, all right, go and find your local woodland, all that kind of stuff. Like that can be, that's one way. That's one beautiful way. It's like, what kind of jogs that, like, what could you do that would give yourself permission? It's also not like going and getting brunch or going and getting pissed at the weekend is the wrong thing to do. Like that's a fun thing to do. And then, but also like you say, I might get a bit bored of that now. So instead of like, how do I think in the past I would have answered this question in such a way of like, oh, well, learn to identify like a couple of the local plants in your garden, all that kind of stuff. That's maybe my way.
Yeah.
More the question is like, one way to investigate is like, what does 8-year-old you want to do? What would they do that meant they weren't in a thinking state, but in a being state? And for me, that was things like go to the zoo or go to the Natural History Museum because I grew up in London, or go to the park and like take my binoculars out with my dad or something like that. And now it's things like, you know, getting in the ocean or going, or like taking my dog for a walk and like, and foraging. That for me, I find really, really connective, but it's not going to be for everyone. So the inquiry is more like, what is going to be the portal for that state? You know?
It's following curiosity, right? Because again, it's that idea of, I see this a lot, people asking me, you know, what's your morning breathwork practice? And I can tell you, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. And I think we're all of us very guilty because it's so easily done at the moment of outsourcing that to somebody else, going, come on, Seth, tell us 101, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps of connecting to nature and finding that wonder. And someone might follow those and go,
I want to challenge both of you there.
Come on then.
Because I feel like I've been this person where I just don't know where to start. And even the concept of sitting with myself, trying to figure out what my younger self like, I'm like, give me something, just pulls me out of my environment.
Okay,
So the first thing for me, like on this, maybe 10 years ago, when I was that person going out every weekend, and again, I'm not condemning it, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I had a great time most of the time. It was starting to go into the beach. I lived in Norfolk at the time. Every Monday, sunrise, with a group of mates, and we'd go for a run on the beach, and then we'd go and get in the sea. And at the start of my week, that was the thing that made me feel more. It was like the feeling of the sensation of being really sweaty and hot from running, freezing cold from the sea, and being in like a wild ocean with waves, and that was the thing that got me. Then it was, I love running, but actually running along main roads isn't great. And I found that there was a forest nearby, and I could go to the forest and run on the trails. That got me out of it. I tried some other things that I saw other people doing, and it didn't work. But I'm glad I did try them, because I then knew that it was only through the process of doing. I might do Jamie's breathwork routine and not like it. I may do another one I see on YouTube and love it, for example.
For sure.
So I think there is sometimes a starting point.
It's the trial and error,
Trial and
of
error.
course. It's just releasing the expectation that just because it works for somebody else,
Definitely.
it's definitely going to work for you. Because I think that's where the bumpy landing happens. Because you're, fuck, this was supposed to work. I was supposed to feel better. And then it's, again, taking you further away from where you're actually truly seeking.
Yeah, if there was like a specific thing to go and do, one of the reasons I like learning about plants is because for me there's something that I call like the consistencies of healthy human culture, and these aren't a set of rules. These are things that appear in culture that seems to be thriving. One of those pillars is like, it seems like people have an understanding of what the plants are. You know, they can go out and be like, oh, I know kind of what that is and what that. So it's like, instead of looking for like what's going to solve these things, I look to often indigenous or more ancient earth-based cultures as to like, you know, not saying that those living like that is perfect either, but like what are these consistent pillars, these patterns that pop up either in modern day or in ancient day that seem to suggest, you know, having a good day, I suppose, and giving yourself permission to do so. You know, maybe intergenerational living is one. A relationship with plant medicine could be one. Having understanding of the other beings that live in your environment, the plants, the insects, the large predators if you've got them, you know, having a close relationship with your food to some degree, having some portion of your meal be something that you've touched, you know, like whether it's growing it, whether it's foraging it, whether it's fishing or hunting or whether it's farming. But I think like it does great things for people to be able to know that at least a portion of their meal is something that they've had a closer relationship with. And there's a lot, I think, sitting in circle, spending time to sit in circle with men, spending time to sit in circle in mixed spaces, you know. These seem to be things, the patterns that keep appearing.
Yeah.
Another one is like have a relationship with fire in the winter months. And like, if I'm really struggling and feeling disconnected and I'm not sure why, I look for the patterns and what I call these pillars of healthy human culture, and I just give them a go. You know, now that's one of the reasons why learning about the plants felt like such a big deal, because I was like, I kind of couldn't believe I didn't know. And there's something so fundamental, like humans and plants are one thing. You know, like what Terence McKenna says, like animals are just something plants created to move seeds around. You know, and like so the earth, what he says is like the earth mind is a vegetable mind first. You know, the Gaianistic mind, the plant rather than the mammal, the female, as opposed to the feminine rather than the masculine, just to use these as two ends of a polarity, two ends of a stick, rather than male and female. But just like, if humans have spent the last 300,000 years, probably more, of many millions, of being upright walking apes with a deep relationship with the plant beings, and that is something I've completely severed ties with, it might be worth exploring that, you know.
I had an interesting experience of this on the coast of Colombia, on a very small kind of eco house that a couple and their two kids lived on. Stayed with them for a week, and you can only access this particular space by boat. So you fly into the airport, which is a tiny airport, and you take like a 2-hour boat, and then you're in this remote kind of like beach, dense jungle, and local people that have basically been isolated completely until about 5-6 years ago. And this couple had moved there from the city, but they'd raised their kids there. And you stay with them in their house, and the kids will like grab your hand, walk you around the garden, and they're literally telling you what every plant is called, what it does, the ones you can eat, the ones you can't eat. The kids are like 5 and 7. And it just blew my mind. They're like, try this. This for this. We use this for this. And these kids, there's not an iPad in sight. Their days, like they go surfing, they come back, they make food, they read book, they color, whatever. But their connection to the plants in the jungle environment around them, it blew my mind how close contact they were. And it was an example of maybe how we once were here as well, right? That close connection to the environment. And I do think it's healing. I think any of us know that we've spent long periods of time in spaces like that. If we have, there is this like feeling that we just feel a bit better. Same as fire you mentioned. We spent a lot of time recently sitting around fires, didn't we, in the evenings. It's like you just feel there's something innate that's activated. There's something genetic that you remember about witnessing fire and being around fire that's different to sitting around a screen and watching a film. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that, because I like a film. But
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a lovely place to wrap, because I think it kind of comes full circle to not where we're going wrong so much, but actually looking at what we've lost touch with that remains in cultures that do seem healthy and connected, and in a place and a society where perhaps things have gone in a different direction. How can we start to not swing the pendulum back all the way the other way and regress, but actually integrate some of these aspects into the work that we do. And super grateful, Seth, for you sharing your work with the world and this information with everybody, but also with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been great to chat.